It started like any other summer night in Willow Creek, warm air heavy with the scent of honeysuckle, the quiet hum of cicadas in the distance, and the crackle of a bonfire casting flickering shadows across the faces of high school seniors saying goodbye to their final summer of childhood. Among them was 17-year-old Emma Greer. In a blurry photo snapped just after sunset, Emma stands with her arms around her friends, red Solo cup in hand, her auburn hair catching the orange glow of the fire. Her eyes are bright, her smile effortless. That photo would later become infamous, not for what it showed, but for what came next. Because 2 hours after that picture was taken, Emma disappeared. Her phone went silent. Her social media stopped. Her family never saw her walk through their front door again. At first, it seemed impossible. Things like this didn't happen in Willow Creek, Missouri. Not here, where everyone knew everyone, where doors were left unlocked, and kids rode their bikes until dusk without fear. But in hindsight, the signs were there. Emma had started behaving strangely in the weeks leading up to the bonfire, more cautious, more watchful. She told her best friend she felt like someone was following her. She'd changed the locks on her car doors, started avoiding walking alone, even during the day. But she never told her parents. Never told the police. Maybe she thought it would pass. The bonfire had been organized at the edge of Larkspur Woods, a popular hangout spot surrounded by thick pine trees and tall grass that whispered in the wind. Emma had been dropped off around 8:30 p.m. by her boyfriend, Tyler Mason, who left shortly after to visit his cousin in town. Emma promised she'd get a ride home with one of the girls. At 10:17 p.m., she texted her mom, "Headed home soon. Love you." She never arrived. The next morning, when she hadn't come home and wasn't answering her phone, panic set in. Her father drove the route between their home and the bonfire site 3 times. At 6:38 a.m., he found her car parked just off the dirt trail that led into Larkspur Woods. The doors were locked. Her purse was inside, untouched. No keys. No phone. No sign of Emma. What had happened in those 25 minutes between her text and the last ping from her phone at 10:42 p.m.? The town mobilized. Volunteers combed through the woods. Drones flew overhead. Police dogs were brought in. But the forest was dense, and the underbrush was thick. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. And then a discovery. 3 miles deeper into the forest stood an old hunting cabin, long abandoned and boarded shut. A local hiker, drawn by a foul smell, broke in through a side panel. Inside, he found no body, only a single object that would change everything. A small, bloodied charm bracelet. Emma's bracelet. Her name engraved on the underside in tiny cursive letters. The same bracelet she'd worn every day since her 14th birthday. Detective Marla King would later describe that moment as the turning point. It stopped being a missing person case, she said. From that point on, we knew we were looking for a body. The town held its breath. News trucks began to appear at the gas station. Rumors swirled. Everyone had a theory. Was it Tyler? Was it that weird loner kid, Lucas? Or was it someone no one suspected at all? But in that moment, the only certainty was this. Emma Greer was gone. And something wicked had been hiding beneath Willow Creek's perfect surface all along. Willow Creek wasn't the kind of place people left, and certainly not the kind of place people vanished from. Tucked along a quiet stretch of highway in Jefferson County, Missouri, the town was known more for its Friday night football games and annual pie contest than for anything darker. But that illusion of safety cracked the moment Emma Greer went missing. To understand the gravity of what was lost, you have to understand who Emma was. Born and raised in Willow Creek, she was the kind of girl who seemed to carry sunshine with her. Teachers called her a natural leader. Neighbors often said she was the kind of teenager who still helped old ladies carry groceries and read to kids at the library. She sang in the church choir every Sunday and had just been accepted into a prestigious journalism program in Chicago. Her parents, Jeff and Dana Greer, were respected figures in town. Jeff ran a local construction business. Dana taught 3rd grade at Willow Creek Elementary. They were known for their warmth, the kind of couple who invited the whole neighborhood to barbecues and never missed a school fundraiser. Losing Emma was like the town losing its own child. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. People began to whisper. At first, it was quiet, just murmurs about the tension between Emma and her boyfriend, Tyler Mason. Then came speculation about her older brother, Kyle, recently returned from a rehab program in St. Louis. He had dropped off the radar the same night Emma vanished. No one had seen him. His phone went straight to voicemail. Had he left again? Or something worse? Detective Marla King, recently assigned to the case, started by constructing Emma's final days. What emerged was a different picture than the one the town had clung to. Emma had been keeping secrets. According to her best friend, Lexi Danvers, Emma had grown increasingly paranoid over the past month. She avoided social events, jumped at loud noises, and even changed her usual walking routes. Lexi dismissed it as stress from graduation and pressure from college plans. But Emma had confided something else, a name. One she asked Lexi never to repeat. Now, Lexi couldn't remember if it had been fear or trust that made Emma whisper it. But she remembered the tone, grave, urgent. "If something happens to me," Emma had said, "don't believe everything they tell you." There was another twist. Emma had recently joined the school paper and had been working on an expose about corruption in the county sheriff's office. No one thought much of it until Detective King found fragments of an article draft in Emma's cloud account. It outlined a complex web of missing funds, anonymous threats, and the alleged involvement of a local law enforcement figure. Was it the ramblings of a curious teenager, or had Emma stumbled onto something real? At the center of this growing storm stood Sheriff Douglas Price, a 25-year veteran and local icon. Charming, well-spoken, and heavily involved in the community, Price had once mentored Emma through a school leadership program. But now, King wondered, had that mentorship given him access to something more? Emma's story was beginning to fray at the edges, revealing layers no one in Willow Creek wanted to see. The town, still reeling from the shock, was being forced to confront a terrible question, one that lurked just beneath the surface. If someone in Willow Creek had hurt Emma Greer, who else knew? By the time the sun rose over Willow Creek on July 15th, the town was already stirring with worry. Emma Greer was missing. The kind of missing that gnawed at the gut, that didn't feel like a sleepover gone long or a teenage rebellion. This was different. Her mother, Dana, had barely slept a wink. She checked Emma's room at least 5 times throughout the night, each time hoping to find her daughter curled up asleep, maybe headphones in, maybe annoyed at the fuss. But the room remained untouched, the bed undisturbed. That text, "Headed home soon. Love you," felt like a cruel echo now. Her father Jeff retraced every possible route Emma could have taken. That's when he spotted it, Emma's blue Honda Civic parked off Larkspur Trail. Not hidden, just placed, as if someone had left it there to be found. The doors were locked. The windows rolled up. Her purse sat on the passenger seat, and inside it her wallet, her house keys, her lip balm. Everything intact. Everything except her phone and Emma. Deputies roped off the area. The Civic was towed and dusted for prints. Nothing unusual came up. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle, no evidence pointing to anyone. The bonfire the night before had hosted nearly 30 people, friends, classmates, even a few kids from the next town over. Most of them had gone home by 10 p.m. According to Tyler, Emma had told him she'd get a ride from Lexi, but Lexi swore Emma never asked. In fact, Lexi had left just after 9:30 to meet her brother in town. It was as if Emma had stayed behind alone. That night, police searched the edge of Larkspur Woods with dogs, flashlights, and volunteers. The forest was dense, the summer heat oppressive. Sweat and nerves soaked through every shirt. But nothing turned up, no footprints, no broken branches, no signs that Emma had gone in or come out. Then came the phone ping. At 10:42 p.m., exactly 25 minutes after her last text, Emma's phone had connected briefly to a cell tower near Black Hollow Ridge, roughly 3 miles deeper into the woods. A dead zone, mostly, where signals faded fast and the terrain became rugged and overgrown. It was a strange place for anyone to be at night, let alone a teenage girl walking alone. That area, police learned, was home to an abandoned hunting cabin once owned by Alan Mercer, a former deputy who died under odd circumstances years earlier. Locals had long whispered that the place was haunted or cursed. Kids dared each other to go near it, but no one ever did for long. The next day, Detective King and 2 deputies made their way out to the site. The trail was barely a trail, overgrown with vines and thorns. The cabin itself was weather-worn and sagging, windows boarded up with splintered plywood. Something inside reeked, a sharp, iron-tinged smell that turned their stomachs. And there, just beneath the broken window frame, was a glint of silver. It was a bracelet, Emma's bracelet. A tiny heart-shaped charm hung from its center, the engraving barely legible through the dried blood. It had snapped, as if torn off in a struggle. And the blood, though it had dried, was fresh enough to tell them one thing. Emma had been there. But where was she now? That night, helicopters were dispatched. Thermal imaging was used to search for any signs of life. Divers scanned Willow Creek in case she'd somehow fallen or been placed there. Tips flooded the sheriff's office. Sightings, theories, rumors. Most led nowhere. One even claimed to have seen a girl matching Emma's description hitchhiking on Route 12, but traffic cameras debunked it. Still, the air in Willow Creek changed. You could feel it in the way people looked over their shoulders. Parents began walking their kids to school. Strangers drew longer stares. Doors that once stood wide open now shut tight before dusk. Emma's case had started as a mystery, but by now, everyone feared the same terrible truth. Something, or someone, had taken her, and it had left just enough behind to haunt them. Detective Marla King had seen her share of missing persons cases, but something about Emma Greer's disappearance gnawed at her in a way she couldn't shake. Maybe it was the bracelet. Maybe it was the eerie stillness of that cabin, or the way the town whispered her name like it was a ghost story. Marla wasn't from Willow Creek. She'd transferred from St. Louis after burning out on big city cases, gang hits, drug raids, cold homicides. She'd come here for quiet, but now she stood in the middle of a town unraveling. The first step was building the timeline. Emma was last seen around 10 p.m. Her car was found the next morning, untouched. Her phone pinged at 10:42 p.m. near Black Hollow Ridge. Her bloodied bracelet was discovered at the abandoned hunting cabin. That much was clear, but everything else? Murky at best. Interviews began immediately. Her parents were devastated but cooperative. Her boyfriend, Tyler Mason, came in for questioning first. Tall, athletic, visibly shaken. He'd been with Emma for nearly 3 years. He swore he'd dropped her off and left to meet his cousin at a gas station 20 minutes away. Security footage confirmed it. He'd arrived at 8:52 p.m. and stayed until nearly 11. Tyler was ruled out, but something about him stuck with Marla. Not guilt, something else. Shame maybe? Regret? Then came Lexi Danvers, Emma's best friend. She was wrecked, sobbing through the interview. She repeated what she'd told police before, that Emma had grown distant, scared. She mentioned the notes, the ones Emma had found in her locker. At the time, they thought it was a prank. I see you. I know what you did. But now, they seemed like something else entirely. Lexi also confirmed something that chilled Marla. Emma had been investigating something. She thought someone was covering stuff up, Lexi said. Money disappearing from school funds, that kind of thing. But it was bigger. She started saying things like, if something happens to me, I've got it saved. What was it? Emma's laptop was next. It was recovered from her bedroom, password protected but easily accessed. Inside were drafts of school articles, dozens of encrypted documents, and a hidden folder titled Backdoor. Inside that folder? Names, dates, screenshots of bank transfers, notes about late-night deliveries near the county line, and most telling, references to P. One entry read, if P finds out I have the footage, I'm dead. Who was P? Sheriff Douglas Price? Marla didn't want to believe it. Price was a respected lawman, decorated, involved in charity drives, football games, and town parades. But Emma's notes hinted at something far more sinister, a trafficking ring moving drugs or weapons, possibly both, with help from someone on the inside. Marla dug deeper. She pulled financial records, surveillance tapes, cell tower pings. She even had the abandoned cabin swept with luminol. The results? A faint but undeniable presence of blood, not just on the bracelet, but on the cabin floorboards. Whoever had been there had tried to clean up. Poorly. The suspect list grew. There was Lucas Warner, the loner who lived near the woods. He'd been flagged before for stalking girls in town, but he'd left for Texas 2 weeks earlier, confirmed by a job offer and apartment lease. Then came Kyle Greer, Emma's older brother. This was where the case took a strange turn. Kyle had a record: minor drug possession, anger management issues, and a stint in rehab. But he'd recently come back home, supposedly clean. Still, he was nowhere to be found. He hadn't shown up to his recovery group. His friends hadn't heard from him. Even his bank account had been untouched since July 14th. Was he running from something? Or had he gotten caught in the same web as Emma? Marla searched Kyle's room. Tucked in a shoebox beneath his bed was a flash drive. Encrypted. It took forensic techs 2 days to break in. What they found changed everything. Hidden camera footage. Night vision. Grainy, but clear enough. 2 men unloading duffel bags from an unmarked van into the woods. One wore a sheriff's department jacket. The other? His face was hidden, but his voice wasn't. Marla recognized it. Smooth, practiced. The voice of Sheriff Douglas Price. The question was no longer if something terrible had happened to Emma. It was who else had known about it, and who was willing to kill to keep it buried. Detective Marla King had stared into the faces of killers before, but none of them wore smiles as convincing as Sheriff Douglas Price. The flash drive Kyle Greer had hidden beneath his bed was the key, grainy night footage of a sheriff's department vehicle, a white van with its plates removed, and 2 men unloading heavy duffel bags into the woods behind Black Hollow Ridge. One of them clearly wore a uniform. The other kept his head down, but his voice rang through the audio like a church bell. Make it quick. She's already seen too much. Emma's voice wasn't on the recording, but it didn't have to be. The implication was loud and clear. Marla took it to the State Bureau the next morning. She knew she couldn't trust the local office. Too many ties. Too much history. The Missouri Bureau of Investigation, MBI, launched a quiet internal probe, careful not to tip their hand. Back in Willow Creek, people were growing restless. The sheriff's office remained tight-lipped. A few brave souls started posting anonymously on message boards, claiming that Price had a history of intimidating whistleblowers, of cleaning up problems before they made it to court. Emma's name began to trend on social media. Hashtags like #JusticeForEmma and #WhereIsKyle flooded Twitter. And all the while, behind the scenes, Marla was piecing together a much darker truth. The hunting cabin wasn't just a place of convenience. It had a history. She discovered it had been sold years ago under an LLC registered in St. Louis. Digging deeper, that company was a shell, no employees, no revenue, just a paper trail leading to a law office that represented ex-cops and dirty deputies. One of them? Alan Mercer, the same man who'd once owned the cabin. The same man who'd died in 2012, officially ruled a suicide, but now suspiciously convenient. The deeper Marla went, the more connections surfaced. Emma had been getting close. Too close. Her school articles were just the tip of the iceberg. She'd been following real leads, talking to ex-employees, watching patterns. Her laptop revealed timestamps and logs of stakeouts. One note read, "Red truck, same time every Thursday. Follows delivery route near Price's land." She wasn't just curious. She was investigating. And she wasn't alone. Kyle, despite his troubled past, had tried to help her. His text logs revealed late-night conversations with Emma, some of them frantic. One stood out. "If you're right, this goes deeper than any of us thought. Be careful. Don't trust anyone in uniform." But Kyle hadn't gone to the police. He tried to confront the men himself and disappeared. The town, still clinging to denial, began to fracture. Parents pulled their kids out of school. Church attendance dropped. Even the 4th of July celebration, usually the town's pride, was canceled. People avoided eye contact. Some started whispering names, Price, his deputies, even council members. People who had once been untouchable. And then there was a new discovery. A deputy named Reuben Calloway came forward anonymously to the MBI. Nervous, visibly sweating, he sat down with Marla in a parking lot 60 miles outside of town. What he said chilled her. "There's a list," he told her. "A black ledger. Price kept it in his safe. Names, numbers, drops. Emma's name was on it. So was Kyle's." According to Reuben, the operation had started small, seizing drugs from busts and funneling them back into circulation for profit. Over time, it grew into a full-fledged trafficking network using county vehicles, abandoned properties, and off-the-books personnel. Emma had stumbled onto it while tracking discrepancies in school fundraisers. The wrong numbers led to the wrong people. Price had tried to scare her off. When that didn't work, they acted. The missing piece was still Emma's final moments. Who had been with her? Was it Price himself? One of his deputies? Or someone else entirely? The investigation was now racing the clock. If Kyle was still alive, he was running out of time. And if Emma's evidence was real, it wouldn't just expose a dirty sheriff. It would blow the lid off a decades-long conspiracy hidden behind Willow Creek's wholesome facade. The masks were slipping, and behind them, no one looked familiar anymore. It was the smell that gave her away. On the morning of August 3rd, 20 days after Emma Greer vanished, a fisherman named Dale Whitmore was casting lines off the banks of Willow Creek, just a mile from the town that shared its name. It had been a dry summer, and the creek had receded enough to expose rocks usually hidden beneath the surface. He was used to the occasional carcass, deer, raccoons, even the odd beaver. But this smell? It was different. Sweet, cloying, and foul in a way that sent his stomach lurching. At first, he thought it was trash. Maybe someone had dumped an old mattress wrapped in plastic. But when he moved closer and saw the pale shape of a hand pressed against the inside of the tarp, small, slender, unmistakably human, he stumbled backward and called 911. By the time Detective Marla King arrived, the scene had already been secured. Forensics moved slowly and carefully. The tarp had been sealed with duct tape and weighted down with 4 concrete bricks. The body inside was badly decomposed, but clothing remained mostly intact. And around the wrist, still clinging to fragile, decaying skin, was a second bracelet. Emma's backup charm bracelet. A birthday gift from her mom. It had her name engraved in tiny cursive, now stained with silt and blood. Marla didn't cry when they confirmed the identity. She'd suspected it from the moment she arrived. But the forensic report struck like a hammer nonetheless. Blunt force trauma to the back of the head. Multiple contusions to the arms and face. Defensive wounds. She had fought. There were no ligature marks, no signs of sexual assault. The motive, it seemed, had never been pleasure. It had been silence. Whoever killed Emma hadn't done it in a moment of rage. They had prepared, wrapped the body, weighed it down, driven it to a secluded access point along the creek known only to locals. This was someone who knew the land. Someone who had experience making people disappear. Sheriff Price held a press conference that evening. He called it a heartbreaking day for Willow Creek, offered condolences, and promised swift justice. Marla stood in the back, jaw clenched. The man on that podium wasn't grieving. He was calculating. Later that night, she reviewed the autopsy again. The wound pattern suggested a single blow from a blunt object, possibly a flashlight or baton. Enough to knock Emma unconscious. Enough to kill her. But something didn't fit. Her body had been dumped downstream, far from the cabin. Yet all the signs indicated she had been taken there. Why the change in location? Then she saw it. Inside the tarp, nestled between folds of Emma's hoodie, was a small scrap of fabric. Olive green. Military issue. And stitched on the edge? A name tag, K. Greer. Kyle's jacket. Was it planted? A warning? Or was it evidence of something darker? The town reacted with fury. Candles lined the steps of the church. Teenagers who had once laughed around bonfires now clutched each other, weeping. Emma's parents, once the anchors of their community, barely spoke. Dana collapsed at the vigil. Jeff had to be held back when Price approached him with condolences. Everyone knew. Even if they didn't have proof, They knew. Emma had been silenced. And Kyle? Now he was either a fugitive or another victim waiting to be found. Marla doubled her efforts. She revisited the footage, studied Emma's notes, and pored through hours of surveillance. One pattern kept reappearing, vehicles moving in and out of Price's hunting land. No logs. No reports. But always the same schedule. Thursday nights. She requested a warrant. And for the first time, the judge didn't hesitate. The search would begin at dawn. But even Marla didn't know what they would find in that cabin, or just how deep the rot had spread. Dawn broke over Willow Creek in shades of gray and gold, but for Detective Marla King, the light felt colder than ever. She stood in front of the cabin like it was a mausoleum. This wasn't the first time she'd been here. But today, she had a warrant, a full team, and the weight of a murder charge pressing down on her shoulders. If there was any truth buried in the floorboards of this place, they were going to dig it up. The structure groaned under its own decay. The cabin, long abandoned by official records, was a relic of darker times. A place of whispered dares and adolescent dares. Spend one night inside, and you'll see the ghost. What no one had said aloud until now was this. The ghost was real. And her name was Emma Greer. The search team worked in silence, combing through every inch of rotting wood and mildew. Dust filled the air. Cobwebs clung to their boots. It was in the back room, once a bunk space for hunters long gone, that one of the forensics techs called out. Found something. Marla stepped inside, her flashlight casting a cone of light over the floor. The boards had been recently disturbed. Faint scratches marred the surface, like someone had tried to claw their way out. They pried up the wood. Beneath it, in a hollowed-out cavity, lay a plastic bag, sealed and tucked behind insulation. Inside, a memory card, some stained duct tape, and something else, something that made Marla's hands tremble. A strip of cloth. Torn, blood-streaked, and unmistakably from a sheriff's uniform. Marla pocketed the card and ordered the rest to evidence. No one said the name, but they all knew it. Douglas Price. Back at the precinct, she inserted the memory card into her laptop and pressed play. The footage was raw. Night vision. Shaky, handheld. At first, all it showed was the exterior of the cabin. Then a timestamp appeared, July 14th, 11:08 p.m. The camera switched angles. Now inside, Emma, bound, gagged, terrified, sat in the corner. Her hair was matted with sweat and dirt. She blinked rapidly as two men entered the frame. One of them thought. The other, unmistakable. Sheriff Price. Marla paused the video, her throat dry. The man she'd seen give press conferences, pose for charity photos, shake hands at high school football games, was now captured on camera dragging a 17-year-old girl across the floor. His voice was calm, practiced. If she talks, we're all dead, he said to the masked man. You know the rules. Then the camera shook. A struggle. Screams muffled. A sickening crack. The screen went dark. Marla didn't cry. She'd done that already. Privately, the night they pulled Emma from the creek. But her jaw clenched. Her knuckles turned white. This wasn't just evidence. It was the nail in the coffin. And yet, questions remained. Who was the masked man? And where was Kyle? Back at the cabin, a final sweep revealed another chilling discovery. Hidden inside a wall panel, they found a second camera, this one old, dusty, but operational. Its memory card contained days of footage, most of it static or empty rooms. But on July 15th, the day after Emma disappeared, it captured something different. A man, beaten, bruised, barely conscious, was tied to a chair in the same back room. He looked up into the lens with swollen eyes. Kyle Greer. He was alive. Or had been. In the footage, the masked man returns alone. No badge. No voice. Just a black bag. He places it over Kyle's head. Then, nothing. The screen goes black. No one ever reported seeing Kyle again. The MBI issued a bolo, be on the lookout, for both Kyle Greer, dead or alive, and the masked suspect. The video was classified, but whispers were already leaking into town. People wanted answers. They wanted justice. And above all, they wanted to believe that this nightmare had an end. But Marla knew better. Willow Creek had built its reputation on clean streets, good manners, and hometown pride. But under the floorboards, in the shadows, behind the masks, it had always been something else. A machine, a system, a cover-up. And Emma Greer, in all her youthful courage, had dared to pull the mask off. Now, it was Marla's turn to finish what she started. The footage had been damning. But its power wasn't just in what it showed, it was in what it shattered. By the time the memory card from the cabin was authenticated and cataloged as evidence, it had already been reviewed by the Missouri Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the Jefferson County DA. Each investigator came away with the same reaction: silence. Then anger. Then resolve. Emma Greer had done what no one else had dared to do. She recorded the truth. And that truth would tear down the myth of Willow Creek. Detective Marla King sat in the back of the DA's war room, surrounded by boxes labeled Price, Black Ridge Cabin, and Greer Files. A monitor replayed the video of Sheriff Douglas Price stepping into the camera's frame. No disguise. No distortion. Just his face, calm, practiced, utterly remorseless. He dragged Emma by her arms as if she were cargo. As if she weren't real. Marla clenched her jaw every time the footage replayed. She noticed something new with each view. A subtle glance at the second man, a phrase repeated like code, a strange tapping of fingers on the window pane. It wasn't just murder. It was methodical. The DA wanted to move fast. They prepared a sealed indictment. Arrest warrants were drawn for Sheriff Price and two deputies, Barry Linwood and Joel Eddings, both longtime lawmen with spotless public records, and now suspected of conspiracy, obstruction, and murder. But they needed more. They needed to find the masked man. The footage from the second camera, the one that captured Kyle tied to a chair, was harder to decipher. His condition was poor. Blood stained his shirt. His face was barely recognizable. Yet when analysts enhanced the image, something caught their attention. A patch on the masked man's sleeve. Military insignia. Special forces. Not standard law enforcement gear. Cross-referencing personnel records with known associates of Price and his deputies led them to a shocking name: Miles Keller, a former Army Ranger turned private security consultant. He wasn't on the town's payroll, but his company had been contracted by the county for disaster preparedness training and logistics. A front. Miles had a history of off-the-books work and was last seen boarding a private plane 3 days after Emma's disappearance. His destination? Unknown. But now, the feds were hunting him. As the investigation unfolded, the town watched in disbelief. People who had once idolized Sheriff Price now avoided his gaze. His office, once filled with thank you notes and plaques, became a fortress. Marla, meanwhile, pushed for transparency. She met privately with Jeff and Dana Greer, showed them the footage. It was the hardest meeting of her life. Dana couldn't finish the video. She collapsed halfway through, sobbing into her husband's chest. Jeff didn't say a word. He just stared, stone-faced, unmoving, until the screen faded to black. They didn't ask why. They already knew. Emma had been right all along. And now, finally, she was being heard. The footage was submitted to a grand jury. On August 18, 2018, Sheriff Douglas Price was arrested at his home at 5:12 a.m. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He simply put on his jacket and held out his wrists. Deputies Linwood and Eddings were taken into custody later that day. The charges? First-degree murder, kidnapping, tampering with evidence, conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice. And for Price, an additional charge: abuse of authority under color of law. Marla watched as Price was booked, fingerprinted, photographed. The sheriff's badge, once polished and worn with pride, now looked like a stain. But this wasn't closure. Not yet. Kyle Greer was still missing. Miles Keller was still at large. And Emma's death, though finally acknowledged, was only one part of a sprawling cover-up. Still, momentum was building. Emma's story had made national headlines. Major networks picked it up. Journalists descended on Willow Creek. Protests formed outside the sheriff's department. The town was cracking open. And inside the cracks, more stories began to emerge. People who had been silent for years started to speak. about threats, extortion, unsolved disappearances swept under the rug. It wasn't just Emma. She had pulled the first thread, but the whole tapestry was unraveling. What began as a missing person case had now become a federal investigation. And somewhere out there, Miles Keller, the last piece of the puzzle, was watching. Waiting. The truth had finally come out. But justice? That was still on the run. The courtroom was packed. Not just with reporters, law enforcement, or Emma's family, but with the people of Willow Creek. Teachers, coaches, cashiers, pastors, farmers. People who had once waved to Sheriff Douglas Price at the town fair now stared at him like a stranger. Some with rage, some with disbelief, others just hollow. It had taken months to get here. Months of hearings, delays, discovery motions, and quiet threats whispered in dark corners. But finally, in April 2019, the trial of the state of Missouri versus Sheriff Douglas Price began. Detective Marla King sat in the front row, just behind the prosecution. She wasn't required to be there every day, but she wouldn't miss a moment. Not after what she'd seen. Not after what Emma had endured. The DA's opening argument was simple. Sheriff Price used his power to cover up a criminal network, and when a teenage girl got too close, he had her silenced. Then the evidence started rolling in. First came the video footage, played on a large monitor in the dimmed courtroom. Gasps echoed through the gallery when Emma's terrified face filled the screen. The jury watched in stunned silence as Sheriff Price dragged her across the floor of the hunting cabin. Emma's bracelet, her bloodied hoodie, and Kyle's voice from the second video were all introduced as physical evidence. The DA pointed to the timestamp. July 15th, 3:24 a.m. Kyle was still alive. But not for long. Next came the forensic testimony. The blood under the floorboards matched Emma's DNA. The tape on the tarp matched the roll found in Price's home. And the concrete bricks used to weigh her body down? From the same batch delivered to the sheriff's property just 2 weeks prior. It was a mountain of evidence. But Price's defense team fought like wolves. They argued the footage was fabricated, that someone had doctored the videos to frame him, that Emma was investigating teen rumors, not a real crime. They even floated the theory that Kyle, out of jealousy or instability, had killed his sister and fled. It was absurd, but in court, even absurdity can plant doubt. Then came the moment that turned the tide. Reuben Calloway, the deputy who had once worked under Price, took the stand. He hesitated at first, voice shaking. But when the prosecution asked why he'd come forward, he looked straight at Emma's parents. "Because I have a daughter," he said. "And if she had been the one in that cabin, I'd want someone to tell the truth." Reuben confessed everything. The drug shipments. The Thursday night runs. The black ledger locked in Price's safe. He testified that Price had lost it when he found out Emma was snooping, that he had sent Miles Keller to take care of it. Keller still hadn't been found, but his name now lived in every headline as the missing accomplice. The prosecution rested. The defense wavered. And when the verdict came in after 2 days of deliberation, the courtroom held its collective breath. Guilty. On all counts. First-degree murder. Conspiracy. Obstruction. Abuse of power. The judge sentenced Sheriff Douglas Price to life in prison without parole. As the gavel fell, Emma Greer broke into tears. Jeff sat motionless, staring straight ahead, his hands folded tight. Behind them, dozens of townspeople stood, not out of obligation, but in solidarity. Emma's voice had finally been heard. Deputies Barry Linwood and Joel Eddings took plea deals in exchange for testimony. They received 30 and 25 years, respectively. Their cooperation had brought justice, but not redemption. As for Marla King, she was offered a promotion, a medal, and interviews on major networks. She declined all of it. "I didn't solve this case," she said once. "Emma did. I just listened." But the story didn't end there. A new task force was established to investigate unsolved cases linked to Sheriff Price's tenure. Files that had been closed without cause were reopened. Names once dismissed as runaways or troubled kids were now back in the light. Willow Creek would never be the same. And maybe that was a good thing. Because sometimes, justice isn't just about punishment. It's about finally telling the truth out loud. The town of Willow Creek never fully returned to what it was before Emma Greer disappeared. And maybe that was the point. On a quiet hill overlooking the edge of Larkspur Woods, just far enough from the cabin to feel peaceful, there's a simple wooden bench. It faces the treeline, flanked by wildflowers that bloom every spring. A bronze plaque reads, "In memory of Emma Greer. You lit the way. We see you now." People visit it often. Some sit in silence. Others leave notes, flowers, candles. One little girl left a drawing, stick figures, smiling, one with long red hair. In crayon, she wrote, "Thank you for being brave." Emma had become more than a victim, more than a headline. She was a symbol. Her story spread far beyond Missouri. National networks ran hour-long specials. Documentaries were pitched. True crime forums dissected every frame of the footage, every line of her journal. But beneath all the media noise was something much deeper, an awakening. In Willow Creek, doors that had once been closed were opening. Citizens demanded accountability. A citizens' oversight committee was formed to monitor law enforcement. Parents taught their kids to speak up even when it was scary. Especially then, Emma's former high school renamed its journalism award after her. The very teacher who once helped her draft her first exposé now teaches an entire curriculum on media ethics and civic courage. Detective Marla King stayed in town. She could have transferred, cashed in the recognition, even written a book. But she chose to stay, not for glory, but because her job wasn't done. In her office, tucked inside a frame, is a copy of one of Emma's notes. The ink is faded, the edges frayed. But the words are clear. Sometimes, the truth is hidden on purpose. You just have to keep asking. Marla reads it every morning before she heads out the door. And Kyle? Kyle Greer was never found. Despite the nationwide manhunt, no body, no message, no final sign ever surfaced. Some believe he died in that cabin, buried somewhere remote. Others believe he escaped, that he's out there, living under a new name, keeping one step ahead of Miles Keller, the missing accomplice still listed as a federal fugitive. The FBI has not closed Kyle's file, nor have they stopped searching for Keller. But Emma's family has made peace with the unknown. "We lost both our children," Jeff Greer once said in an interview. "But one of them gave the world a gift before she left. She made people listen." That, in the end, is what Emma Greer changed. Not just laws or systems, but hearts. She reminded people that truth matters. That no one is too small, too young, or too alone to make a difference. And that sometimes, the light comes from where we least expect it. In Willow Creek, people still talk about the summer of 2018. About the girl who vanished and what came after. And when they do, it's not the footage they remember, or the headlines, or even the courtroom. It's the girl with the camera. The voice that wouldn't be silenced. The echo that still lingers in the trees.